Next, I'm excited to introduce our keynote speaker for this evening, Don Manzullo. Former Congressman Manzullo is currently the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Korea Economic Institute of America here in Washington, D.C. Representative Manzullo is well known to many of you in our audience this evening because of his role as a staunch advocate for small business, manufacturing, and trade between the United States and Asian economies. For 20 years, Congressman Manzullo has represented the 16th District of Illinois in the U.S. House of Representatives, serving on the Foreign Affairs, Financial Services, and Small Business Committees. Mr. Manzullo has been recognized for his leadership on various legislative issues, including receiving the Distinguished Service Award from the Small Business Exporters Association, the Leadership Award from the Coalition for Employment Through Exports, and the prestigious Wings of Liberty Award from the Aerospace Industries Association. Prior to his congressional service, Mr. Manzullo practiced law as an attorney in Oregon, Illinois. He holds a Juris Doctor from Marquette University and a BA from American University. Please join me in welcoming tonight's keynote speaker, Mr. Donald Manzullo.
Take our seats.
Well, since I'm speaking before dinner, I should tear the speech in half. Congressman Mike Honda, my colleague, Mr. William Woo-Kyung Hong, and Mr. Hyun Kyung-do. It's a real honor to be here this evening, distinguished guests and participants. I thank you for this opportunity to share with you some of the thoughts about the Republic of Korea in the inevitable goal of unification of the peninsula. I say inevitable to emphasize that unification is not an issue as to whether or not it will occur, but when it will occur and under what circumstances. Korea, a country involuntarily severed by World War II agreement among the victorious Allied powers, still remains a country involuntarily severed. The passing of time does not make the artificial division of the Korean peninsula any more natural or acceptable. Korea remains a distinct and resilient nation. For hundreds of years, under ancient Korean dynasties, Korea focused on unity and largely achieved it. However, during the last century, Korea's history is one of colonization, civil war, and military coups. Korea has learned the hard lessons of accommodation necessary for unification. At one time, she had to choose between academic learning and global commerce. Today, that is no longer necessary. Difficult times make for durable souls, and Korea is no exception. The word unification is interesting. The English dictionary says it is the process of being united or being made whole. Reunification means back to an original state, place, or condition. The Korean Ministry of Unification, not reunification, recognizes this distinction, and so does your organization, the National Unification Advisory Council. The word unification means an ongoing process involving all the people of the Korean Peninsula, implying the people of Korea have never been separated in spirit, though in body, and the process of unification is connecting the body with the spirit. The word reunification, however, implies a complete severance that occurred at one time. And thus the goal of unification is simple: to recognize that which already exists and to work towards the process of the completion of Korea's national unity and Korea's national identity. That is why unification is inevitable. The spirit is crying for its body, and the body is crying for its spirit. Unfortunately, many surveys among the young in the Republic of Korea demonstrate the lack of interest for unification. According to research by Seoul National University, in 1994, 92% of South Koreans considered unification necessary. By 2007, that had fallen to 64%, and support is even lower among the young people. A survey conducted by the Korean government in 2010 showed only 57% of teenagers were interested in unification, a 14-point drop in 13 years. Among teenagers, it appears the percentage of those interested in unification drops by 1 percentage point each year. One 2013 European article dealing with unification has as a title, "The Dream of Reunification Fades in South Korea." It referenced another survey showing only 25% of Koreans firmly support unification, but 65% support it if huge costs and social upheaval can be avoided. And that's why it's important to educate not only the people of the Republic of Korea on the inevitability of unification, but the whole world as a whole. When inevitability is assumed, the focus shifts from not if, but when and how. You are not truly free if your brother is living in slavery. You're not truly satisfied if your brother is hungry. You are not a fulfilled person if your brother's life is counted as insignificant. Your body can never rest until it's reunited with the spirit. Yet time in Korea, unfortunately, is working against unification. Time serves as another method to keep the body from full unity with the spirit. And that's why it's important to do what you're doing here today. South Koreans and the entire world must be reminded of the absolute need for unification. President Park Geun-hye, in her Ministry of Unification, labors incessantly to continue the process of unification through the following 3 items. First, normalizing inter-Korean relations through a trust-building process. This is not just a euphemism, but it involves programs aimed at the very soul of the North Korean people to resolve humanitarian issues, adhere to existing agreements, create dialogue channels, and promote reciprocal inter-Korean exchanges and cooperation. 2, preparing for unification by improving customized programs for North Koreans' resettlement. This is about education, medical assistance, and building a cultural center for North Korean refugees to serve as a communications hub. It's about launching a 1.5-track consultant group cooperating with other countries with similar experiences. We see already South Korea and Germany launching a unification panel with their first meeting just a few weeks ago. The Dresden Declaration, announced in Germany last March, calls for more humanitarian assistance, and we see just this past week the ministry developing new divisions and recognizing and reorganizing to accomplish that goal. And we see the Visegrad Group of former Soviet satellite nations consulting with the ROK on the unification methods. The Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland, and Slovakia met with the ROK in July in Bratislava and put their heads together on how best to accomplish unification in South Korea and North Korea. 3, achieving unifications through building a foundation that ensures everyone's happiness. This is addressed by creating a green community for research in the DMZ, launching the Vision Korea project to develop industrial infrastructure such as roads, railroads, electricity, and information communication, and building a consensus on how to launch a unification plan for one national community. Unification is not easy. Witness KEI's Claire Hubbard in her paper on the social assimilation of North Korean refugees into South Korea. She makes this statement, quote, "While North Koreans have difficulties adjusting to the social and cultural climate of South Korea, they have almost no difficulty in adopting to political ideology. North Korean Juche ideology, literally translated self-reliance, but more commonly known as the political thesis developed by Kim Il-sung, stating that the Koreans are the masters of the country's development, is drilled into the minds of the North Koreans. But it was not found to be one of the socio-cultural aspects that defectors held to upon their arrival in South Korea." Wow. Maybe it's because they never believed that stuff in the first place. Or maybe when they saw freedom in action in South Korea, they saw exactly how free the human spirit could be. They rejected this indoctrination, but in any case, what was drilled into their heads is not a political problem and adaptation, and that's extremely important on unification. I'm going to stop right here just for a second. Charlie Rango just came in, a great American, one of my colleagues, folks, a great American hero. Good to see you, Charlie. I miss you guys. President Park Geun-hye calls it a bonanza, a spectacular windfall for Korea, and not a burden. She's very careful to use the term bonanza, not just in reference to the South, but a bonanza to all Koreans. That is significant because the process of unification is not to punish the North with spoils going to the South, but to help and lift up all Koreans. That's unification. And unification is nothing to be feared. The goal is to make unification a natural and consensual process, a soft landing with gradual unification supported by worldwide interests. It's obviously much easier to deal with difficult issues over a prolonged period of time, and rushed decisions are often far removed from their desired conclusion. Believing unification is inevitable makes the how a lot easier and places the emphasis not on speculation, but on the manner of implementing it. The Park administration and the National Assembly work day and night to bring that about. And the benefits of unification. The first benefit is the most obvious: freedom and disappearance of North Korea's brutal and odious regime, which is the source of massive abuse of human rights and instability in the region. A unified Korea will live in freedom, period. Second, extra young workers would replace the need for workers from Southeast Asia. Manufacturers and others could look to people living on the peninsula to fill these jobs. North Korea has a younger population than South Korea and has a higher fertility rate, and this could help solve the long-term problems of a rapidly aging population and workforce replacement. Three, there would be huge gains in the mining sectors. South Korea has a scarcity of minerals. North Korea is loaded with coal, uranium, and rare earth minerals. South Korea could utilize its technologies to mine and use these minerals because there's a worldwide shortage of rare earth minerals, which are used in everything from guiding missiles to cell phones. And rare earths are associated with the highest level of manufacturing technology. Some estimate the rare earth minerals to be over $6 billion. China is the only other producer of rare earth. Just think, a unified Korea would be involved with every country involved in high technology manufacturing, selling them a product that they can't get. Fourth, a united Korea will have a newly expanded domestic market and an increase in tourism. The DMZ would be gone, trade would get easier, a unified Korea could emerge as a consuming industrial powerhouse. But this will not be easy. It will be difficult. But let me ask you this question. When have the South Koreans ever backed away from a challenge? Did they back away from refusing to surrender their identity during the Japanese occupation? Did they back away from the invasion from the north, fighting nearly to the end until the Americans and others came, including Charlie Rango? Did they back away from the outlandish dream of becoming a world power and leader in manufacturing when they had few minerals and a little history of manufacturing? Did they back away from the ambitious statement that South Korea could build ships when Jun Young, with no shipping build experience, no shipyard, no money, convinced investors to order a ship from him? And when asked if Koreans had experience building ships, he reminded the investors that Admiral Yi Sun-shin built a turtle ship, the world's first ironclad ship that sank the Japanese fleet just a few years ago in 1592. Did the South Koreans ever think that their war-ravaged country, in rubble at the end of the Korean conflict, with a handful of PhDs, per capita income lower than those of Haiti, Ethiopia, and Yemen, and North Korea itself, did they ever believe it could become a world leader, especially in light of statements such as those penned by John Caldell, who in 1955 described Korea as, quote, a land of misery and chaos and a nation unable to help itself because it has no voice in any major decisions affecting its future? Well, how did Koreans, in a little over 5 decades, rank number 1 in math among the most industrialized countries? How did Korea become the 5th largest exporter of machine tools in the world? How did Korea become the 2nd largest manufacturer of semiconductors? How did Korea become the largest shipbuilder? How did Korea capture 7% of America's domestic auto market? How did Korea become the 12th largest economy? South Koreans have always met their vision, no matter how hard the task. And their documents witness that triumph. The March 1st, 1919 Declaration of Independence from Japanese occupation was signed by 33 national representatives, all of whom were leaders in their religious community. Some important assertions in that declaration. We hereby declare Korea as an independent state and its people as free. If we are to wash off yesterday's rancor, if we are to shed today's agony, if we are to abolish tomorrow's menace, if we are to eagerly broaden our shrunken national conscience and state pride, if we are to achieve natural development of individual character, if we are to keep our poor children from inheriting anguish and shame, if we are to bestow everlasting blessings on our descendants, then our first duty is to secure the independence of our nation. Korean independence will be an indispensable step towards the stability of East Asia as well as part of the world. A new spring has come, hastening the rebirth of every living thing, the declaration reads. While we held our breath in the ice and snow, our pulse now stirs in the warm breeze and sunshine. The fortune of heaven and earth has returned to us, and we ride the changing tide of the world. We hereby rise up. To begin is to succeed. We only need to march in the light that is given to us. And that rugged spirit of independence and unity of the peninsula carried into the Constitution of the Republic of Korea. It recognizes the March 1st Declaration and pleads for unification. Quote, having assumed the mission of democratic reform and peaceful unification of our homeland, and having determined to consolidate national unity with justice, humanitarianism, and brotherly love, the territory of the Republic of Korea shall consist of the entire Korean peninsula and its adjacent islands. And the Republic of Korea shall seek unification and shall formulate and carry out a policy of peaceful unification based on the principles of freedom and democracy, end of quote. Often, Korean children sing their anthem, stating the hope of unification. The 3rd verse reads, autumn sky is void and vast, high and cloudless, the bright moon is our heart, undivided and true. And the refrain expresses how it will be done. 3,000 li of splendid rivers and mountains, filled with roses of Sharon, great Korean people, stay true to the great Korean way. That's what will do it. That's what will bring about unification, is the great Korean way. People who do not know the meaning of the word no. People who have always risen above and beyond the occasion. Ambassador An tells the story of talking to 3 students. He asked the question, how is it that South Korean students excel in academics? One student said, well, perhaps we're taught that by our parents. A second student said, perhaps we have learned that the road to success depends on our excellence in studies. The third student said, Mr. Ambassador, perhaps it's simply because we are Koreans. Korea, one peninsula, one people, one country, and one destiny.